Wolfgang was learning to, be a musician from the age of 4. And he was started to compose things when he was 5 or 6. By the time, a small number of years, it was the family Mozart, the dad and the 2 children as child prodigies, making money as musicians. So was Mozart an entrepreneur age 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? What stage? I don't know. One of the things that you will need to be a successful entrepreneur is you will need, essentially you're offering people something that they can't get from other people.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the 4th episode of the Welsh Dream podcast. So today's episode is on entrepreneurship, and we are really excited to be talking about this because essentially that's, I guess, the premises of who we are as an organization, and I guess the premises of what the Welsh Dream is as a whole. So for us, I think we believe that entrepreneurship provides opportunities for people, opportunities that they might not have had before, opportunities for them to pursue their passions, opportunities for people to also come out of poverty if they are, because they're creating sort of new ideas and new things for themselves as well as their communities, just a whole host of things really. So we're just really excited to be having this conversation today.
Yep, welcoming Simon onto the podcast, our guest for the episode. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Simon Horsman. I'm, by some standards, an old man, other standards not at all. I've got a friend of mine, he's 103, so, compared with him, I'm quite a youngster. But I started teaching in higher education as long ago as 1980, and I had my first job as a messenger for a firm of solicitors in my school holidays in 1965. So, I can play the age card in a number of different ways, but probably simplest is perhaps to think of me as either your granddad or your father in that sort of age.
Right.
And then that gives you a big perspective. So, for example, I was brought up poor, so I didn't see a television until I was 12. Now, one of the results of that is that I'm a reader. I never saw reading as work or as a problem. Reading was my way of looking at the world, being everything. The other thing, which may or may not come out in this podcast, is that I talk a lot. I probably talk before I walked. So a 10-hour conversation is not a problem for me. 20 hours might be.
Don't worry, it's not going to be that
10,
long.
I don't get out of bed for less than half an hour, really. But, it's everybody's different. The other thing, for example, I didn't have a phone. We didn't have a phone at home. So I first got to using a telephone when I was at work in the sales office. I think I must have been about 20. So, you got used to a call coming in, could we speak to Mr. Smith? And I'd say, yeah, Mr. Smith is, he's on the other line at the moment, but let me sort of shout across the office and say, thanks, and you want to talk to so-and-so? I developed a telephone manner, but late in life. That's very different from kids today, kind of born with a phone, So it's a very different world, and of course, the other paradox is that on the one hand everything was terribly different, on the other hand things are very much the same. So you've got this kind of duality, that if you want to focus on continuity, you can see the same patterns coming over and over again. If you want to focus on difference, you can make out a case that everything is different.
So how did you then end up getting into teaching entrepreneurship?
Right, I got into teaching because, I'd always thought I might be a teacher when I was old, and old was when you plan your life at the age of 15. Old was about sort of 40. But in fact, I ended up marrying a head teacher when I was 29, and for the long holidays, laugh, I decided to move from my commercial job with ICI, the chemical company, although I was with a bit that dealt with retail, to go into teaching. And so I began teaching. I was a qualified accountant by that stage. So I began teaching accounting and bookkeeping in a further education college in autumn 79. And in the next spring I moved to the Lanchester Polytechnic, keep changing its name, it's now Coventry University, teaching accountancy. And then, in order to understand accounting better, I did an MBA at Warwick, and that was good. It gave me a broader base, and entrepreneurship just kind of naturally grows out of what you do. You know, if you're interested in business. You may also have come across the term entrepreneurship, I-double-N, entrepreneurship, which is essentially employing an entrepreneurial attitude and skills within a larger organisation. So obviously questions of innovation, success in business, you're concerned with all of them. So in terms of teaching entrepreneurship, I can't remember, there was a small business and entrepreneurship module, final year business studies degree. I taught that for a few years. This would have been back in the 1990s, I think. I can't remember. But we had a reorganisation and I had to choose between the accounting and the strategists, and the accountants wanted me more than the strategists. I'd have liked to have carried on doing both, but didn't work out that way. And so I moved back to teaching accountancy, and also in the noughties I began to teach personal finance, which interests me a lot. I'm still really interested in personal finance, personal financial education. Then in 2009, I was age 60, and there was a deal on offer, phased retirement, where you could draw a pension with no actuarial reduction and go onto a fractional contract. Now, if you've done personal finance, to be able to take a pension with zero actuarial reduction is kind of gold dust. You grab it with both hands, and I did, and it's worked out really well for me. So since 2009, I've been working 50% at Coventry. So I gave myself a treat. I went and did a Master's in International Development at Birmingham part-time, 2010 to 2012. That was good. And again, I was able to look at personal finance education and its role in international development. The name Yunus, the Grameen Bank, he got a Nobel Economics Prize for it, was one of the people that I looked at. So that, I mean, I've always been an internationalist. That's another whole set of conversations, which comes from my family. I'm just not me doing anything special, but just my parents were £10 poms. By the time I was 6 months old, I was in Australia. We came back when I was 3.5, but we've always been international. So that was the MSc in International Development, and then I also, when that finished, I got involved in an accountancy practice, working with small companies, independents. That in fact didn't suit me. It tended to be fairly bureaucratic, routine, tax oriented. There wasn't much opportunity to talk about business. You know, they assumed that you knew nothing about business and they knew everything, and they really didn't want them to know. They just wanted to get out of the office as quickly as possible and pay as little tax as possible. So that was, in retrospect, that was a mistake, but you know, it was a mistake I could afford to make, luckily. So I've carried on at Coventry at my 50%. My decision is never to retire. It's possible that ever. It's possible that someone will tap me on the shoulder and tell me, Simon, it's time to go, and I'll say, why? And they may be able to prove to me that I've lost it, and maybe I will have done. Or maybe I won't have lost it, in which case I'll challenge them to sack me. If I had to audit it, I'd say, yeah, I'm your man, no problem.
A bit now.
Definition.
Yeah.
Yeah, we spoke about that on the
Yeah,
call, didn't we?
yeah.
The definition of entrepreneurship.
Defining entrepreneurship. Thinking about this, I did go and have a little research, and I came across a wonderful quip. Entrepreneur is a fancy French word for somebody who's unemployed, which I thought was really clever.
Right.
As if it ends there.
I think one of the problems of entrepreneurship and defining it and understanding it is it's actually a word normally applied by analysts and commentators. I don't think many entrepreneurs say, "Oh, I'm an entrepreneur." Then maybe they do in 2023, because the name has, the word entrepreneur has kind of come up in public consciousness, and it's kind of a good thing to be. So plenty of people maybe claim to be entrepreneurial when they're not. But if you go back a few decades, if you'd ask somebody who said, "Are you an entrepreneur?" I say, "No, I'm a butcher." "Are you an entrepreneur?" "No, I'm a car dealer." "Oh, you are an entrepreneur by being a car dealer." "Oh, am I?" You know, it just didn't compute.
Right.
So I think you can also waste a lot of time on definitions as well. I don't think it's always helpful. I like to focus on the activity, so behaviour will be more or less entrepreneurial. Right, that's one point.
So what's that behaviour then?
Sorry?
So
I'm glad you asked me that. My approach to entrepreneurial behaviour, if you look in the dictionary, you find entrepreneurship is almost always about business. To which I say, really? And it's also a lot about risk. And I'm saying, why take a risk if you don't have to? So I'm applying, I suppose, my audit consciousness to that sort of dictionary definition. So my current understanding of entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial behaviour, the entrepreneur, if you want to talk about it, is that it's a two-stage process. The first variable I'm talking about is PTTI, the propensity to take the initiative. And the second part, a bit like a rocket, one to get lift off another. The second one is where are you going to take it? Which direction are you going to exercise that initiative? Because let me tell you, I'll tell you the real life example first. Then I'll give you the politically incorrect example that made me think along these routes. Three brothers. Jeff, the eldest, is a friend of mine. He's a bit older than me. And his grandfather established a toy wholesaling business in 1906. And he was, the grandson, leaving school in the 1950s, maybe early 60s. And he was expected to go into the family business. And he said, "I'm not really interested in wholesaling toys, Dad. Do I have to?" And his father very sensibly said, "Well, I don't know. What are you interested in?" And Jeff said, "Art." "Oh." So he left school after GCSE O-levels and went to art college. And he got taken on as a designer by British Leyland and had a successful career, getting to the sort of top but 1 or 2 levels in design. Very, very successful career. Anyway, his 2 younger brothers both went into the family business. Fast forward, from 1960 to the mid-1980s, business was doing really badly. The computer meant that the wholesale function had been virtually wiped out. You've got Toys R Us on the scene. He went to his brothers and said, because he'd have management training through British Leyland as part of his design, as a designer. Anyway, it didn't work out, so the business folded. Now, are you more entrepreneurial to say, "Dad, I don't want to go into the family business," or are you more entrepreneurial by going into the family business? I'm not sure. I don't think it's not an easy computation.
There's no right or wrong, really.
I don't think there is. My politically incorrect one was to imagine two sisters in a family business. And the elder sister dutifully goes into the family business. The younger sister says, no, I don't fancy that. So she spends all the time looking good, going on Instagram, TikTok, spending money on makeup, clothes. What she wants to do is to marry the richest and most powerful husband that she can. Now, to me, she's a lot more entrepreneurial than her older sister who just went into the family business. So I don't think it's easy to say this is entrepreneurial and that isn't.
Right.
I'll give you another example. Mozart, right? Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. His father was a musician, and in fact his father was a better music teacher, probably. He was an okay player, but he was a very good teacher. And he was teaching Wolfgang's older sister, I guess the piano, maybe the violin, I'm not sure. Anyway, age 6, and Wolfgang, aged 4, said, "Ooh, I want to play." So okay. So anyway, so Wolfgang was learning to, be a musician from the age of 4, and he was started to compose things when he was 5 or 6. By the time, a small number of years, it was the family Mozart, the dad and the 2 children as child prodigies, making money as musicians. So was Mozart an entrepreneur age 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? What stage? I don't know. Later on in life, yes, he wrote his own operas and had to make his own way in the world and was wheeling and dealing between Salzburg and Vienna and working with De Ponte on the libretti for his operas and whatever. So how do you understand Mozart as an entrepreneur? I think it's quite tricky. De Ponte is the real entrepreneur. He is amazing. His father was Jewish, converted to Catholicism, as you do in Austria in 1760, because there was that much anti-Semitism, who cares? He decided he'd go in, so he converted to Catholicism, decided he'd become a priest, but by his early 20s he got 3 children with some woman, so he clearly didn't take his life as a priest particularly seriously. He was a reader and managed to get in touch with Beaumarchais' writings and basically turned them into Mozart operas. But Austria was very badly damaged, threatened in the Napoleonic Wars, the end of the 18th century. And, De Ponte got himself to London. He ended up in New York, and in 1850 had a lot to do with founding the New York Opera House. I mean, this guy is seriously entrepreneurial. I don't know much about him, but, an amazing life. Another example of entrepreneurial behaviour, and this is Catherine the Great of Russia is my number 1 female entrepreneur. Right, she's born in a small Protestant princedom in North Germany. They've got, I think, remote family connections to the Russian royal family. And anyway, 14 and a half, she's packed off to Moscow in the winter to marry the Tsarevich, the heir to the Russian throne. Who proves completely inadequate. By the time she's 30, she's converted to Russian Orthodoxy. She's had him murdered, or allowed him to be murdered. She's still in good odour with her mother-in-law. She's got a son. I mean, what's not to like? I mean, how the hell do you do that? And then, of course, she goes on and starts, taking land from the Turks, the Poles, everybody, down into Asia. I mean, I don't know how, amazing. And she was an intellectual, corresponding with Voltaire. She's worked amazingly hard. I mean, what an amazing woman. Now, is that entrepreneurship? I think it is.
So on that, I guess you've just raised a few key points there. People needing to, I guess firstly, just being open to trying things. But then also secondly, I think it's just that, like the woman.
Catherine the Great.
Okay, yes. Because what she did is just essentially set her mind to what she wanted and then just.
Well, we don't know what she wanted. It may be opportunism, but I think certainly one of the things that you will need to be a successful entrepreneur is you will need, essentially you're offering people something that they can't get from other people.
A product or service.
Sorry?
So that's a product or service.
A product or a service, and product again can be broken down into trading when you're not changing the state of the product. So a lot of people, young kids, I've forgotten which entrepreneur it was, but basically he started in business by going down to Aldi or equivalent and buying a dozen cans of Coke and then taking them to school and selling them for 3p more than he paid for each can. And that sort of trading.
Did you?
I've done that.
Really?
Chocolate bars.
Yeah, that sort of trading is certainly entrepreneurship. And I think, I haven't quite worked out how and why, but I think males, are more naturally drawn to that and find it much easier. But obviously,
why do you think?
I don't know.
That's
I don't know.
Thing,
I don't know.
Because it shows then even in the stats, sometimes in business you'll see that men are more likely to succeed in entrepreneurship. They're more likely to get into it, but they're more likely to succeed. But then it's just getting to grips.
I'm not sure they are more likely to succeed. I think they're much more likely to get into it. Whether they're...
Well, I guess because if they're already in it, there's already a disproportionality anyway.
I mean, I think one of the issues is, to be honest, is physical. You think somebody's going to steal the stuff or take your money.
Right.
Or they'll take your can of Coke and they'll laugh in your face and say, "Oh, you think I'm going to pay you for it?" So be able to give somebody a thump. So I think there are definite differences there. I mean, the classic, of course, is the whole drugs industry, which relies on protection rackets. Because it's criminal, or large parts of it are criminal, it's a perfect market, very easy. So the only way you can make any money is actually by physically forcing other people out of the market. And that means protection rackets and all sorts of things. And it's all about muscle. So
maybe being more prone to violence. I don't know if that's a male.
Prepared to, and also upper body strength.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just fact of life.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to talk about running, women can probably run further, but men can run faster, quicker. And that actually matters if you're trying to get away from somebody. To say that, on a 5-day basis, a woman can run further than a man isn't actually a lot of good to her.
Yeah.
But I guess on top of that, because if you look even when people look for jobs, etc., right, it's seen that women are more likely to undersell themselves, almost as if it's a confidence issue.
I think that's. I haven't looked into that. That's the general view that I'm certainly happy to go along with it as the general view. I don't fully understand why it's the general view. It depends. I am actually doing some work on entrepreneurship, especially female entrepreneurship. I haven't got very far yet, but one of the aspects of entrepreneurial behaviour is what's known as the dark triad, which is a mixture of narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, right? So you find someone like Donald Trump probably scores high in all three, right? You probably find Putin is medium or mixed on the narcissism. He can show that, but maybe he's adopted the narcissism because it's good to play that out as president. We don't know whether it's natural or assumed. In terms of his KGB training, well, naturally that will have brought out Machiavellianism. I mean, that would be standard for anybody in any secret service, whether it's British, American, French, Russian, or anything else. Whether he's a psychopath, I really don't know. I don't think you could say.
Wow, that's pretty tough. So.
I mean, there are measures you can get. Now, in general, women score much higher on empathy and lower, I think narcissism mainly reflects how you were brought up. So I suspect there are plenty of narcissistic females as well as males. I think that probably reflects family backgrounds, things. In terms of psychopathy, I'm not sure. I think women in general are much less psychopathic than men. Whether it's because of fear of being found out and the consequences, I don't know. Again, I mean, there's a lot of psychology here and a lot of testing, and I haven't found the time to read the 200 academic articles that I need to in order to understand this. You're welcome, as the viewers of this podcast, to do your own research and come back to me with what you've found. And as for Machiavellianism, I'm not sure. I have no reason to think women are any less Machiavellian than men, but I think they're possibly more worried about the consequences, and therefore they're more likely, that the fear is more likely to keep them on the straight and narrow. And having said that, I think women are stronger in empathy that acts as a kind of countervailing power to all three of the dark triads, the dark triad variables.
It's interesting.
It is interesting. There's a lot of research being done, and it's not fully understood. And obviously there are going to be differences between societies, differences over time, difference in social class, difference in family position. I mean, a lot of women who've achieved a lot are possibly the only child of in a family, or possibly the eldest child, and their relationship with their fathers is often extremely important to the development of that entrepreneurial edge, quality, set of qualities. So research needs to be done, and it's easy to speculate and sort of say, blah, 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 blah. Coming back to, in general, the entrepreneurial literature, one of the things I find it wants to simplify. So one of the things I don't think it brings out enough is that people change their entrepreneurialism through life. If you look at Jim Ratcliffe, one of Britain's richest men, controller, largest shareholder in Ineos, and one of the people bidding for Manchester United, he's from northwestern England, and his initial qualification was in chemical engineering with, I think, a bias towards petroleum in Birmingham, University of Birmingham, my hometown, as it happens. Then, having graduated, he went and worked for Esso in Fawley, their refineries. He then qualified as an accountant, as a SEMA, the management accountants, which specialises really in cost control and management information systems. I'm not quite sure why he left, but he did, and he then went into the city and finance. Now, when you put all that together, he was then able to buy large chunks of petrochemical works that British Petroleum was leaving. And now, bidding for Manchester United, financing, I think sailing is one of his hobbies. He's very entrepreneurial. But whether he actually was entrepreneurial when he went off to university at 18, 19 to do petroleum engineering, or when he signed up to Esso as a young graduate, I have no idea how entrepreneurial he was or not.
So what, it's about the environment then as well?
Well, yes. I mean, I think a lot of opportunism is about opportunity and seeing an opportunity and being in a position to take it safely. That's where this thing about risk comes to mind. I mean, why take a risk when you don't have to? So,
well, because you just want to. Well,
there are some people who genuinely want to, but why?
Also, I guess there's this thing about passion, though, isn't it?
Well, that's different again. If you're really passionate about something, it's not a risk. You must do it. The fact that it's risky, who cares? If you're climbing Everest, it's pretty risky. But if you really want to go, the Scottish lady who got killed on K2, Alison, I think her name was, about 10, 15 years ago. Climbing over 8,000 metres is heavy stuff and always risky. I've been asked to talk about where passion fits into entrepreneurship, and I think it fits in two quite different respects. Firstly, if you are passionate about something, you will put a lot of time into it. And if you put a lot of time, you'll get good, even if you weren't very good to start with. The book called 10,000 Hours is important in this respect. Just, Mozart was playing music from the age of 4. The Beatles, as I understand it, were a pretty ordinary band, but they went off to Hamburg, and for 18 months they played 6 or 7 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week. Now, a better band may well have been getting gigs and doing 2 or 3 gigs a week for what, an hour and a half? Maybe spending a few hours practicing. They weren't spending anything like the amount of hours of getting better that the Beatles did.
Oh, that's really important.
So I think the thing about passion is to say you get good. Whether it's photography. The other thing you learn, I was talking about photography on the radio recently, and the guy was saying, I take thousands of photographs a year. Probably only half a dozen, 10 are really good. And you think, wow. This is a world-class photographer who, so there's a sort of trial and error dimension. But it's interesting in the area of music, how many musical people come from musical families. Richard Strauss, Adelina Patti, who's got Swansea connections, J.S. Bach and his offspring, Mozart. You go through the list. Purcell, it's amazing. So it's that finding the sort of, this is the family business. You might want to be like your dad, you just. So that's one aspect of passion: putting in the hours, not worrying about how many hours you spend, devotion, and getting good. And once you're good, people will want the best. Portrait painter, violinist.
Before that bit, how important then is just the grit and the resilience, especially, I guess, resilience in that stage?
The circumstances of a lot of these people is that the resilience wasn't necessary. If your dad's a music teacher and your family is going around playing and being paid for it, you don't need resilience, do you?
But let's just
say yeah, sure. No, there are situations. I think it was Nellie Melba, whose family really didn't want her to be an opera singer. So there are cases where you need to go against the grain. Jeff, the guy I mentioned before, wanted to go to art college and the family business. He needed to assert himself. So it can be necessary, but I think resilience tends to come later on, when you're kind of launched, but you've got the confidence. I don't know. I need to look at this. But the other aspect of passion is that you don't care about the risk. You don't care that it's a long shot. Rolls Royce, right? Everyone knows the name of the cars. How did it happen? Rolls was a Monmouth man, minor aristocracy, plenty of money, and loved cars. And he was the French and the Germans were the pioneers of cars at those times, and he set up a garage to import French cars into London and had a fancy showroom. And he went to Henry Royce saying, well, look, can we build a better car? And Henry Royce, being an engineer, said, well, probably. And the rest is history. But Rolls got bored pretty soon. And he flying, wow. So he was in an aeroplane and he killed himself before, 1910, 1912. He was that kind of guy. He didn't care, So a lot of the passion, say mountain climbers, rock, they for one reason or another, and that of course links back to the psychopathy. Not caring about yourself is pretty kind of irrational and odd and dangerous, and most of them don't live very long.
Lack of empathy.
Lack
for
of
yourself,
empathy,
really.
absolutely, and back to
Yeah.
narcissism. He wants to be special, focus on oneself.
But they're the kind of people who run the world in some
Well, some of them
aspects.
run the world.
Yeah,
They think they run the world.
Right.
They do, don't they? Though?
Well,
Nice
Trump did
yes
run the
and
world,
no.
didn't
They think they do.
So-
It's that kind of mindset that
Yeah.
helps you get to those positions of power, really.
I
because-
think mine. But a lot of the power stuff is convincing the people with the power that you can serve their purposes.
Right.
So Hitler would have been an example of that.
Mm.
Where I mean, he was. There was a group of right wingers in Munich. They really sort of crystallised in 1918, 1919. And they wanted somebody who could speak to the ordinary man. And Hitler, as a corporal in the German army with a good war record, was that man. But he didn't have the original ideas of racial superiority and anti-Semitism and whatever. That came from, he wasn't the theoretician of the Nazi Party. Sorry?
More like a mouthpiece at this point.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But once he got into his stride, he was an amazing mouthpiece, able to emote and draw millions of people in to follow him. So...
There's often a saying, well, that a lot of young people use, fake it till you make it, especially when it comes to business, etc. What are your thoughts on that? Because I guess to some extent, that's what a lot of people do, to be fair.
I'd try it with me sometime. you know, I mean, you know.
All the time in the house.
If it works on other people, more fool them. You know, you're not,
So it doesn't
you're not
work?
having my money.
So it doesn't work.
Absolutely not with me, but it may work with some people. I mean, the number of people who fall for scams, whether they're pyramid selling schemes, pyramid finance schemes, romance fraud. I mean, you think,
Well, I guess
how could you be so
talking-
stupid? I mean, you're really thick. You deserve to lose your money if you're, the people who followed Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes, who claimed she had this, magical technique of diagnosing with one, finger prick of blood, etc.
Oh, yeah.
And load of people bought into that.
Because we are hopeful as human beings. We're optimistic. So.
I'm a pessimist. I have lost money on this and that, but I've known what I was doing. And
No,
I've never
I
lost
was
very
asking
much.
in terms of the entrepreneur themselves, sometimes maybe that confidence
Oh
isn't
yeah,
there.
if you
Maybe
believe
the
your own
ideas,
propaganda,
yes.
possibly believing your own propaganda is part of it, and I don't believe my own propaganda, so it's possibly why I'm not a successful entrepreneur. I'm just as suspicious of myself as I am of other people.
There's like a trust that you've got to put into it.
No, I mean, I don't mistrust people, I just want to know.
Yeah.
I'm not paranoid, I don't rush around thinking people are trying to get me, I
Yeah.
just say, you're saying this for your benefit, not mine. You may be right, you may be wrong, let's test it.
Right.
But the trust bit, like you're saying, I think
More
that's
personal.
on a personal level.
Yeah,
Exactly.
like a leap of faith you have to take sometimes if you want
Exactly.
to launch a business or a new venture. And that maybe you kind of have to blindside yourself
Oh yes,
to all of these risks.
I have taken various jumps, which were basically not particularly successful. The good news is that I only ever lost bits that I could afford to lose.
Right.
That's
This is a key point, though, actually.
The key point is relative knowledge. Do you really know the field?
Right.
In particular, do you know your customers and what they want? That's the critical thing. Because if you know your customers and what they want and you can deliver that, then you've got the basis of a successful business.